So we're in double digits now. This is episode 11 of 12 of this podcast, which means we're almost done, but just with this season because we have so many stories to go. And we have really done all the hits, right? I mean, we told stories about cloning technology. We told stories about how your, family dog can help solve science mysteries. It has been so cool.
We've been underground with bats. We've been very close to wolves. We've been in kelp beds, watching what the sea urchins are doing in the kelp beds. We've been so many exciting places and so many great stories to tell.
And in the case of the beloved southern sea otter, preservation efforts tap something that couldn't be manufactured in the lab, the maternal instinct.
I'm Peter Gross, wildlife expert, educator, and behavioralist.
And I'm wildlife ecologist Dr. Ray Wingrant. This is Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, the podcast. Episode 11, Sea Otter Surrogates. I have to say, I was definitely not always the girl with the maternal instincts, but luckily they clicked into place right around the time that I started having kids. And it's been such a joy to even notice them surface in myself. I mean, whether it's knowing when my kids are awake in the night and heading to their bedroom before they can come into mine, or even just knowing exactly how to comfort them or feed them or just detect different things in them. But it's one of those things that makes us so much a part of the animal kingdom.
Exactly. I often think when I take my children into the wilderness that I turn and I check the straps on their helmets if we're going to be mountain biking, or if we're going to be rock climbing, double check all the ropes. If we're going to be rafting, tighten the life jackets. All these instincts just seem to surface when I have our children in those situations.
The Monterey Bay Aquarium in Northern California and the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach are using the maternal instinct in female sea otters living under human care to help raise abandoned otter pups so that they can be re-released back to the wild.
This program pairs stranded orphan pups with adult females. They will get the initial stranding calls, bring the animals in to stabilize them. From there, that female does all the work to raise the pup. It teaches them to groom, socialize, and forage. And then once that pup is ready to be weaned from its mom, that pup will be on a releasable track out to go back into the ocean. And this helps repopulate some of the existing territories for the southern sea otter.
While in the surrogacy program, these pups learn survival skills, like how to use rocks to open shellfish. A skill that the original Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom host, Marlon Perkins, documented back in 1973.
Sea otters are recognized by scientists as one of the few mammals that have learned by themselves to use a simple tool. By turning over completely in the water, bits of broken shell are washed away. The otter keeps a good grip on the abalone and the rock to keep from losing them.
On a recent episode of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom Protecting the Wild, Ray and I got to meet some of the key people who were instrumental in the success of this program.
I was down in Long Beach where some older sea otters living at the Aquarium of the Pacific have been recruited as surrogates. That's where I met Megan Smylie. Megan is the Sea Otter Program Manager.
I just cannot remember a time where I was not fascinated by marine mammals.
I want you to kind of help bring our listeners into the story of the sea otter in America when the southern sea otter population was basically at its height. Can you tell us when was that? What was that era?
If we go back a few hundred years, there would have been anywhere from 150,000 to up to 300,000 sea otters along the coast of basically the Pacific Ocean, going from Baja, Mexico, all the way up the North American coastline and then over into Japan. What we found was that people are very attracted to these animals, which has not changed. And the reason they're so attracted to these animals is that not only are they very charismatic, but they have this beautiful fur coat. The fur coat was this highly coveted item that not only symbolized status for certain populations and different cultural groups, but also it kept people very, very warm because it helps keep the otter very, very warm. And once people were able to commercialize the hunting of sea otters for their fur, that is when the population really started to decline.
In 1911, the Fur Seal Treaty was signed by the U.S., Japan, Russia, and Britain, representing Canada, and put in place protections for seals and sea otters. Later, the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act were passed, but all of these things came kind of late.
They had been hunted to almost extinction, and so the southern sea otter was thought to be only having a population of about 50 individuals left at that turning point of the Fur Trade Treaty. And so once those protections started to come into play, those protections really allowed the animals to kind of stabilize and then slowly start to grow again. And so here along our coast in California, we have recovered to approximately roughly 3,000 southern sea otters left along our coastline. And probably one of the more shocking statements is that they're only existing in about 13% of their historical range. And so in their current range, they have reached carrying capacity, which means that they cannot continue to grow because the food sources available are basically at a maximum for them. And so right now, fast forward from the 1700s to 2024, they're still considered threatened because of the small population that exists.
You know, you are such a wealth of knowledge. The area that I think you were describing that's up to carrying capacity is not that far from Monterey Bay Aquarium. And when we filmed there, I was surprised at the numbers that we would see along the shore and the kelp beds and the seagrass. And that's all great news. It appears to me that people are sort of loving to see them again so much that we have to really make sure when you go to view them, you keep your distance. I think the limit legally is 500 feet, right? Don't otters need at least that much room? Do you know about what that number is?
I believe the legal limit is 300 feet or about 100 yards for all marine mammals, not just the sea otters. But I think the better advice I could give is stay as far away without causing any disturbance. Some of the challenges with these disturbances is that it actually causes a pretty high metabolic requirement for them that they shouldn't necessarily need. And so what I mean by that is if an animal is sleeping at the surface and then gets scared and has to swim away or flee, they're now required to make up for that calorie loss. And when we're talking about animals that are eating between 20 and 30% of their body weight already, it really complicates things for them.
Right. I couldn't get too close to the otters I saw up in Monterey Bay, but you got to be up close and personal with a couple of mamas in the surrogacy program with Megan.
I don't see anything yet. Oh, yes, I do.
Here it comes. So we have two of our adult female southern sea otters, Millie, and then behind her is Chloe.
Wow.
That day was super fun because we got to bring Ray to the behind the scenes areas in a couple different places, but we got to be up and close and personal with two of our adult females, Millie and Chloe, who are just incredible animals. They are two of our surrogate mothers. They are helping to raise and teach young releasable animals how to go back to the ocean. And so that's really, really cool.
Peter, I have to say, this is me admittedly personifying the sea otters a little bit. Okay, so forgive me for that.
Okay.
But they're essentially like middle-aged moms, right? But you would never guess they were like hyperactive, almost like puppies would be, right? I mean, they were zooming around. They had all the energy in the world. I mean, they were doing flips and tricks and begging for food. And I remember it was just fun.
Millie and Chloe are really special because they get to make people fall in love with them daily. And then when it's time to get that call of, hey, there's a releasable pup that needs a mom, they get the call into surrogacy and they get to go off behind the scenes where they are paired up with these pups and they get to teach them all sorts of cool skills like grooming their fur, which is crucial to their survival. The fur is super dense. It has about 1 million hairs per square inch. And it's so dense that their bodies are not getting wet when they're in the water. They are pretty water resilient and can stay super, super warm just with that fur. And so the pups learning how to groom it properly is really, really helpful for their survival. In fact, they would not survive if they cannot properly groom themselves. And so they're teaching them to manipulate prey. So they're going to be offered a bunch of different live type food where there's urchins, crabs, clams, mussels, oysters, all sorts of things. And these little pups don't know how to open any of that stuff. And so Millie and Chloe get to be the amazing teachers of those types of behaviors.
These little sea otter pups become stranded for a variety of reasons: severe storms or hurricanes, getting entangled in fishing gear, or sometimes being bitten by sharks. Different organizations try to help these pups once they've been spotted.
There's a number of organizations that respond to stranding calls along the coast of the Central California region. And they will go out and actually evaluate the situation. And then depending on the results of that quick evaluation, they will bring it to the most appropriate facility that can care for it. And most of the time that is Monterey Bay Aquarium, where they are going to intake an animal, especially the young pups, do a full exam on it to see what attention medically it needs, and then begin a treatment plan from there with that animal, grooming it, bottle feeding it, because at that point, those babies depend on milk for survival and are starting to learn how to swim, which is so counterintuitive. Every time I tell people sea otters have to learn how to swim, they're always surprised by that.
Do we have an idea of the foster pups that are re-released back to the wild? How many of those are successfully reproducing themselves?
As of about 2 or 2.5 years ago, Monterey Bay Aquarium has posted some pretty impressive data from their program. And of these surrogate reared animals that have been re-released, over 40, probably closer to 50 births have happened just in the last 18 years. And so we're proud to be a partner with them. They're amazing, and we are honored to be a part of their program.
In terms of your career, how did your career overlap with the Millie and Chloe career, right, of being surrogate moms? Did you get to kind of watch their skills develop? Did you watch them kind of become surrogate moms for the first time?
So Chloe, we're going to start with her because she is the older of the two. Chloe's about 11 years old now, and I was fortunate enough to meet her when she first came to the Aquarium of the Pacific. She was a stranded pup that had some neurological issues and was deemed non-releasable. And so fortunately, she outgrew some of those neurological issues and is a really healthy, wonderful animal now. But she has always been one of my favorites because she is just really calm, really sweet, sometimes a little aloof, which is an abnormal characteristic for an otter. Now Chloe is raising sea otter pups to go back to the ocean, which is incredible at how instinctual and natural she picked it up. I was surprised at that. Millie and I met, I think Millie has been here for about 5 years now. And so we were kind of meeting as Millie was an adult, and I had worked with otters, but none like Millie. She's this powerful, super dominant force to be reckoned with. There's no doubt in her maternal instincts. She is a fierce mom in the coolest way possible. And so watching her get to be around these releasable pups has been an incredible journey because she is one of the coolest moms I know, human or animal. She's just instinctual. She commands respect from all creatures, humans alike, that she works with, and it is an honor to work with her.
Megan, this is a bit of a personal question, but I'm wondering if, there's no right or wrong answer, but if working with these particular surrogate sea otters has taught you anything about yourself.
Working with the animals specifically, I think they humble you all the time. And I mean that in the coolest way. You could be feeling really confident in how you're going to handle something or a plan, and then they show you that there's other ways to do things, and your plan maybe wasn't the best, and that's totally fine. We just have to adapt and move on. I think it's humbling every time you're around them, whether it's how amazing and impactful they are, or, oh my gosh, you taught me so much that I didn't know I didn't know. So it's constantly learning, which is really cool.
Megan isn't just a sea otter caregiver. She's a sea otter whisperer with a vast wealth of facts about these charming little mammals.
I mean, one that it still surprises me to this day is eating 20 to 30% of your body weight a day is like a really common otter fact. But when you actually see how much that is and you see how big a sea otter is, you're like, how is that possible? So I always tell people, if you weigh 100 pounds, that's like eating a 30-pound turkey every day of your life. And that's just to survive.
And where do they keep their food?
They keep their food in their armpits. And that is one of my favorite facts also. Sea otters have pockets, and it's really just some extra fur and skin around their armpits. And they will dive to the bottom, pull food off the bottom, stick it in their armpit pockets, and then come up to the surface and have a full buffet on their chest at the surface of the water. And so sea otters having pockets, but more specifically armpit pockets, is hilarious. And I think kids always think it's really funny if we tell them you're going to keep your snacks in your armpit.
Do they make any noises?
So when a sea otter pup needs to find their mom, they scream very loudly. And on the surface, you're like, oh my gosh, that pup is in major distress. But really, they're just screaming because they want to know, Mom, I'm over here. I know you just dove to get some food, but I'm over here now. And they have to be able to hear each other, and out in the ocean can be quite loud. But the screaming is, I think, jarring when people first hear it for the first time.
Megan, you are like an encyclopedia of sea otter information. You have a cool job. You're obviously very happy about it, and you retain all of this info. You're fantastic. Thank you so much for taking me through the Aquarium of the Pacific a few months ago, and then thanks for joining us on this podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much, Megan. You were great.
Thank you.
As a keystone species, the sea otters help to maintain the ecological health of their environment. Megan's work with the Sea Otter program is helping to naturally reinvigorate sea otter populations in the wild. By matching abandoned pups with surrogate mothers, Megan and her team are ensuring magical moments in the wild kingdom for future generations.
Join us next week when we speak with bear biologist Dan Bailey with the New Hampshire Department of Fish and Game. Dan and his team of biologists are working to address a growing bear population whose habitat is shrinking due to human development.
Habitat loss is certainly the greatest threat that's facing our black bear. In the last 30 years, our bear population in the state has more than doubled. But during that period of time, we've also added over 300,000 residents to the state. Bear are a species that require large blocks of unfragmented forest land.
That's next week on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, the podcast.
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, the podcast, is a production of Pineapple Street Studios and Mutual of Omaha.
Our senior producer is Stephen Key. Producers are Zandra Ellen and Jenny Van Solen. Associate producer is Lisa Serda. Editor is Darby Maloney. Executive producers are Barry Finkel, Gabrielle Lewis, and Jen Wolfe. Pineapple's head of sound and engineering is Raj Makija. Senior audio engineers are Marina Pais, Davy Sumner, Javi Cruces, and Pedro Alvira. Additional engineering by Rob Miller and Jason Richards. This episode was mixed by Davy Sumner.
Production music courtesy of Epidemic Sound and Hearst Media Production Group.
Episode clips courtesy of Hearst Media Production Group. Fact-checking by Justine Dahm. Marketing and promotion by Emily Paschel. This podcast is hosted by me, Dr. Raywyn Grant.
And me, Peter Gross. A special thanks to Caitlin Williams, Sophie Radmilovich, and Stephanie Diaz.
Today's episode is based on the Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom series created by Don Meyer. Our next episode will be out in a week.
Make sure you listen on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.